Hello there, welcome to DKLSQ Media channel, and today we are going to discuss a hot topic, the banning of affirmative action laws by the Supreme Court. Affirmative action laws have been a contentious subject for many years, and the recent ban have sparked a lot of debate. Proponents of the ban argue that affirmative action is a form of reverse discrimination, and therefore, it is no longer necessary. However, the opponents believe that affirmative action is still needed to address historic inequality. Promote diversity. What is affirmative action? Affirmative action is a policy aimed at increasing workplace and educational opportunities for people who are underrepresented in various areas of society. It is a government-backed policy that was developed to diversify various parts of society. The policy focuses on demographics with historically low representation in leadership, professional, and academic roles. The nature of affirmative action policies varies from region to region, and involve sets of policies and practices within a government or organization seeking to include particular groups based on their gender, race, sexuality, creed, or nationality in areas in which such groups are underrepresented, such as education and employment. Affirmative action programs are commonly implemented by businesses and governments by taking individuals' race, sex, religion, or national origin into account when hiring. The main purpose of affirmative action is to diversify various parts of society. The affirmative action policy helps to ensure the provision of financial assistance to groups that historically have been and continue to be subjected to forms of discrimination. The policy is a program of positive action, undertaken with conviction and effort to overcome the present effects of past practices, policies, or barriers to equal employment or privileges opportunity aimed to achieve the full and fair participation of women, minorities, and banning affirmative action by Supreme Court individuals with disabilities. The purpose of affirmative action is to establish fair access to employment or privilege opportunities to create a workforce or environment that is an accurate reflection of the demographics of the qualified available workforce or environment in the relevant job market or privilege offers. Recently, the Supreme Court, after extensive deliberation, delivered a landmark ruling that effectively prohibits the use of race-based affirmative action in college admissions. As a result, race-blind admission becomes the new admission way forward. Unfortunately, race-blind admissions processes will override existing inequalities and undermine the recognition of the unique challenges that Black, Hispanic, and Native American students encounter throughout the admissions process. By disregarding the significance of race, any approach adopted moving forward will indeed create a wider divide between equal opportunity and offering meritable opportunities to the communities of people of color. The decision to ban affirmative action marks a significant setback for colleges that have relied on this tool for over 40 years to enhance race diversity on the campuses and compensate for decades of both explicit and implicit race-based exclusion. Now, colleges have to explore alternative options like focusing recruitment programs on metrics, such as household income and wealth as substitutes for race-based admissions. Research studies have shown that flagship schools from states that already practice the ban of affirmative action and were using alternative tactics have a poor track record of success in achieving meaningful diversity gains in the number of students admitted without implementing the affirmative action system. The lessons learned from the flagship state schools. From available public records, prior to the recent ban of the affirmative action nationwide, a total of 9 states have implemented bans on affirmative action. Top educational institutions like the University of California and the University of Michigan abandoned the race-based admissions and find new ways to admit diverse student entities. As a result, these universities made significant efforts to foster racial diversity by investing hundreds of millions of dollars in outreach programs. However, according to 2 amicus briefs in support of affirmative action filed by these 2 universities last year to the Supreme Court, their alternative approach endeavors have proven to be ineffective. The 2 universities revealed perpetual low enrollment rates among students of color, regardless of their significant investment in alternative ways to boost diversity among the applicant pool and student enrolled. When California's implemented Proposition 209 in 1996 that banned the use of racial preferences in admissions, the state experienced a significant decline in enrollment rates across its educational institutions. Most notable was the decline in Black student enrollment at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. In 2006, only 96 students, less than 2%, self-identified as Black out of a freshman class of nearly 5,000 students. Although enrollment rates have shown some improvement since then, disparities in enrollment still persist. For example, only about 228 students, 3%. At the University of California, Berkeley identified themselves as Black out of a nearly 7,000-strong freshman class in the fall of 2022. By comparison, the 2021 to 2022 high school graduating class in California had approximately 8,700 Black students that met the requirements for admission into the University of California system. These limitations in effort to foster diversity have come at a significant cost to the University of California system, which saw a financial cost that exceeded $500 million in investment since 2004. At the same token, at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, the enrollment rates for students of color experienced a decline, following the state's adoption of Proposal 2, commonly known as the Affirmative Action Initiative Alternative, in 2006. This voter referendum also led to a state constitutional ban on race-conscious admissions. By 2021, Black enrollment at the state universities stood at a small 4% ratio, a 3 percentage point drop from 2006. Regardless of the significant growth of college-age African Americans in Michigan from 16% to 19%, the state still experienced downturn in admission of students from the minority group. Such result is a true testimony of the fact that University of Michigan faced challenges, despite the effort of the state government to ensure that the flagship school reflects the diverse demographics of the state in their admission process. The ban on affirmative action has made it significantly difficult for many universities to achieve proportional representation of underrepresented groups, and imposes new constraints in racial equity and equal opportunity in higher educational system. Social class and wealth are not adequate measures in capturing diversity. The more likely available alternative to race-based admissions, certain schools and advocates are considering is using the socio-economic status, including wealth, as a criterion for preference in college admissions, irrespective of race. Nonetheless, this race-blind alternative falls short in capturing the full scope of what race-based admissions could achieve. Focusing solely on socio-economic status fails to address the specific obstacles that affirmative action was intended to combat. One significant drawback of this race-blind approach is its potential exclusion of deserving middle-class Black, Brown, and Native American students. These students may not meet the criteria for preferential treatment based on low socio-economic status, in addition to already prevalent racial disparities and systemic barriers that hinder their educational opportunities. By overlooking the importance of race, this alternative will fail to acknowledge the need to uplift marginalized race and ethnic groups who may not fit very well into a socio-economic-based framework. Also, when considering wealth-based admissions, it is important to acknowledge the significant larger population of white Americans when compared with the population of African Americans. Even though there may be a higher proportion of the Black population falling into the low-wealth category, the potential pool of low-wealth applicants may still consist of a significantly larger number of white students. According to Federal Reserve data from 2019, 31% of youths from households in the lowest quarter of the national wealth distribution, with a net worth of $12,400 or less, are Black. Even if preference was given to students in the lowest half of the wealth distribution, with a net worth of $121,700 or less, a smaller proportion of the eligible low-wealth applicants, 24%, would be Black. As the mundane practice of corruption has been, regardless of the belief that Black people may be overrepresented in a wealth-based program, the alternative method may still be flawed in capturing many Black students. Class-based admissions based on household income have also been a popular alternative to race-based admissions. But similarly to wealth, this criteria would fall short of the diversity objectives set by admissions offices, and as a result, it will undermine efforts to address discrimination accordingly. Based upon a study report by Georgetown University's Center on Education and the Workforce, selective colleges that are prohibited from considering race and ethnicity in admissions decisions-making may augment some level of racial and ethnic diversity by adopting class-conscious admissions practices. Nonetheless, the study highlighted the considerable difficulties these institutions would encounter in achieving anticipated student numbers that accurately reflect the demographic diversity of their state's high school population, that should display a higher rates of enrollment across different racial groups vying for the universities. The findings from the Georgetown University Center on Education and Workforce Research suggest that maintaining or surpassing existing representation without race-conscious admissions would lead to a complete overhaul of the admissions system that eventually will force some changes in applicant evaluation and consideration criteria. While socioeconomic status can be a relevant factor in addressing certain forms of disadvantage, as college education should absolutely be more accessible to low and middle-income students of all races. Socioeconomic status alone cannot fully replace the multifaceted impact of race-based admissions. The pending Supreme Court decision on student loan debt forgiveness adds an additional layer of complexity to using socioeconomic status as a proxy for race in achieving diversity. Student loan debt is yet another barrier that will hinder students of color from acquiring higher education. Without student loan debt forgiveness, students of color hailed from low-income backgrounds will face even greater disparities. Irrespective of whether the students from low-income family who have loan debts at high school level will ever get admission into the universities due to financial support constraints or similar or close to similar reasons as a result of socioeconomic status quo. All fall within the setback caused by the intersection of student loan debt, structural racism, and poverty. All of these factors magnifies the existing gaps in the ability of students from low-income family to be able to enroll in higher education institutions. This form of deficiency can impede efforts to achieve a more inclusive and diverse student numbers in all colleges based on race and socioeconomic factors. The complexities of racial discrimination and the need for targeted measures to address historical injustices cannot be adequately captured by a race-blind approach alone. It is important to recognize the unique and ongoing struggles people from underrepresented race and ethnic groups face, and then use that precedent as an index card to refer to while continuing to advocate for holistic solutions that address both socioeconomic disparities and discrimination as a whole when it comes to race and admissions policies. Affirmative action programs in higher education came into existence specifically to rectify the history of race-based exclusion, legally enforced segregation, and the quota systems that capped and deny admission to the number of non-white or other minority students permitted to enroll at colleges and universities across the country. The history of discrimination has everything to do with denying students admission based on race, regardless of their social or socio-economic class. Hence, the vices lead to many of the enrollment disparities we still see practiced today in many institutions in the society. What can universities do? To set the precedents of eradicating race-based injustice and denial of admission, the adoption of race-blind admissions would not provide greater benefits to students of color when compared with the existing impact of race-based admissions. As such, any alternative approach would likely harm the enrollment rates of these marginalized groups and prove financially burdensome to implement. Rather, recognizing the significance of race discrimination in addressing the systemic inequalities and prioritizing inclusive measures that provide safeguard access to higher education for underrepresented communities. Universities should relent on advocating for affirmative action alternative that strongly prioritize admission provision quota with highest ratios assigned to Black, Brown, and Native American applicants. Here are some examples of affirmative action alternative policies universities can adopt. 1. Providing training programs, outreach efforts, and other positive steps to encourage the admission of underrepresented groups. 2. Showing a preference for selecting and/or promoting members of a demographic or minority group with a history of discrimination. 3. Setting goals and timetables for increasing the representation of underrepresented groups in the school system. 4. Providing mentorship and support programs for students from underrepresented groups. 5. Offering scholarships or internships to students from underrepresented groups. 6. Creating a diverse hiring committee to ensure that the admission process is fair and unbiased. 7. Providing accommodations for employees with disabilities to ensure that they have equal access to job opportunities. Moving forward, we need to find a balance between addressing historical inequalities and embracing a fair and inclusive society. The banning of affirmative action laws will undoubtedly shape the future of college admissions and workplace diversity, as well. As the debate continues, it is important to engage in constructive dialogue and seek common ground. Regardless of one's stance on the issue, we must acknowledge the importance of creating equal opportunities for all. These discussions will shape our understanding of fairness, justice, and inclusivity for generations to come. Thank you for reading this article and review to this end. Do not forget to like and subscribe if you have not subscribed. Bye now.